Hey, welcome back to the Sound Horizons podcast, brought to you by Toontrack. I'm Rick, which is exciting to you, I know. It's equally exciting to me because I'm him. But I'm here today to continue the trend of talking to the coolest people in the music industry about the coolest things music related. Today's guest is no exception. Scholar, gentleman, author. No, he's none of those things. But he is one of the coolest guys you're going to meet. For a minute, you were all trying to, in your mind, figure out who it was that I was going to put. Like, who's the author in the school? No, this is just an amazing human being. Name is synonymous with so many facets of the heavy and hard music genre that we have to talk to him. So please, internet, people that belong here and trolls, all alike, I know you're all here, please put your warm internet hands together for my friend and yours, Mr. Eyal Levi. Dun, 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 dun.
Hello.
Look, I always apologize normally after those intros because there's no cool segue to be like, I'm going to pretend that I'm talking to live people and then I'm going to talk to a computer screen. It's just so we do our best. You get it though, right? You're there. You're a professional podcaster. You know these woes, correct?
I'm amazed you do the intro so well, like with the guests there. Lots of times people do them after the fact.
And no, we just want to make sure that you know there are way better things we could both be doing, right? No, listen. So I wanted to start off with that because you do so many things, and we're going to get to most of them. But you're a podcaster. That's a big part of what you do now. Talk to me about that transition. Do you like podcasting? Is it a thing you're comfortable with? Is it necessity? Is it interest? What brings you down this road out of all of the other things you already have going on? Why do you choose to add this crazy thing to your repertoire?
So podcasting is cool for me. And I've spoken about this with friends of mine that podcast who also have a bunch of other things going on. And for many of us, this is the only time that we get like an hour or half hour, 2 hours, just a focused amount of time to catch up with friends or to meet new people who otherwise, like, when else am I going to get like this much of your time, for instance? So this is a really good way to get good focused time with people where if you were to cold call them, no chance. So for me, it always served a business development function for URM with getting people to do Nail the Mix. I mean, it's a lot easier to get people to do Nail the Mix to come on as a guest mixer if I already know them and we've already had a conversation. Also, that way I already know if they know how to speak into the camera or have a whole conversation like a regular human being. So for me, the podcast served a really important function. Both the podcasts, URM and Riffhard, have never been focused on becoming like big podcasts where like the podcast itself is the business and you do everything related to making a podcast profitable. We've always seen it as part of the funnel that gets people onto the Riffhard platform. And I don't mean subscribers, I mean instructors.
Ooh. So that's another great question. So all of this stems you're this guitar player, you have this musical background, you come from a musical family, you have all these things going on, and then one day you have the lightning bolt URM. So so not only do you have this crazy concept, but you have at the time, arguably now, because it's been quite a while, you have this
coming up 10 years.
Yeah, this undiscernible crazy, ultimate recording machine. It's like, it's amazing. It's like this crazy title, this crazy moniker. How does this process work for you where you get to the point where you're like, I'm working on records, I'm playing in a band, I'm doing all this stuff, but now I want to maybe transition over to sharing this information with other people. What is that journey? Because that's not a journey most people take. Most people would be sitting in your situation prior to URM going, I'm living the dream. I'm a musician, I'm working on records, I'm playing live, I've got this band, this is what I wanted to do, I'm doing it, this is enough for me. But you're like, no. Let me find some other like-minded people and try and share a lot of this stuff. What is that about?
Several factors. This is a big decision. When I decided to do URM, I quit everything else. So it was a really, really big decision. But contrary to popular belief, I did not feel like I was living the dream at that time. For a few years, I had this thought in my head, like there's something more, like this isn't it. And I would be thinking, if I'm doing this exactly like I'm doing it now, 20 years from now, that is not good. And I don't want to think about that. So I knew that there had to be something else. And I was starting to get really, really miserable. And I started doing creative lives of a couple of years before URM, our mutual friend Finn. And I originally did those as a favor to him because I was the only producer he knew. And the audio channel was something that he was selling the higher ups on. So I just agreed to help him out and be his instructor and just help get it off the ground. But I was very, very hesitant to do it. Honestly, I thought it was kind of cheesy to go up there. And I learned this program, Easy Drummer, that I had never used before. Nice. Because he told me I should use that because lots of people use it. I was like, okay, I'll learn it. And we did that. And it went great. I remember. It just went absolutely great, unexpectedly great. And I enjoyed every moment of it. And I felt like I was doing something really positive with all the years of expertise I had built up. So then I did another one, and then another one, and then another one. And mine were on par with the famous producers I was introducing Finn to. So yeah, sometimes a really, really famous producer would do better than mine, but not that much better. And so starting to just get this idea that maybe there's some clues here as to where I can take this. So I asked Finn, look, I want to get out of Florida. I don't want to produce metal bands anymore. I'm looking for the next step. Why don't you hire me? Like, I'll run the audio channel with you over in Seattle. And he said, no chance. You're going to hate it here. It's going to be a culture clash between you and the people at Creative Live. I'm not even going to bring it up to them. It's not happening. I was like,
never speak of it again. Never.
I was like, all right, but I'm going to do it myself then.
Wow.
I was like,
all right.
And then I'm going to eventually hire you. And I don't know if he took me seriously or not, but that's basically what happened. I decided to start my own version of it. But also through my experience in Creative Live, I realized that there's at this time, 2013, 12, 14, there was no information on the internet or in traditional schools on how to produce metal at a high level. You could go there for literally anything else. You want to learn how to produce Latin pop? Cool. You go to school. Want to learn how to produce hip hop, country, any of that? You could go to school. You could get an internship in any number of big cities. And there's this not exactly a pipeline, but for all intents and purposes, there was a pipeline for metal, which I think is the hardest of all the genres to get sounding good in the studio. There's literally nothing. There's some forums here and there and a couple of really bad producers, not professionals, just making random YouTube videos. And that was it. Wow. So it just seemed to me all right, the generation that I grew up listening to, starting to get a little old now. No one has their knowledge, except for maybe the 3 people they interned. The new generation are all getting into this home recording thing that's becoming, there's a tsunami. There's no way to stop it. Musicians are going to be recording themselves and they're not going to know how to do it. And metal is going to sound like garbage. And all these bad predictions about record labels going out of business and there being no future in this are going to come true. And I want to do my part to help raise the bar. So it's kind of that's a lot of different things, but it was kind of this mass of all those different ideas put together, which led to me thinking, now's the time. I need to quit doing everything else and just focus on this URM idea.
So given how much you invested in those other things you quit, how hard were those conversations sort of with the respective people on the periphery on both sides, with the band as well as the other producers and engineers and people you were working with? How hard were those conversations when you were like, hey, guess what? I'm going to go away for a while. You're on your own. Thanks. See you soon.
Oh, it didn't go very well. I think, so the band was already on a hiatus. We had already gone on a hiatus at that point in time. But as far as like my studio partners, the moment I started doing creative lives and like putting myself out there like that, that was the moment that the relationship just tanked, I guess. So people in my immediate circle were not pleased at all. And let me just say,
Wow.
at all with me doing this.
It seems kind of arbitrary, no? Or is it just me looking at it with rose-colored glasses? It doesn't, in my opinion, given, again, the way these circles work and the way life works, I would be looking at it objectively going, oh, this isn't the world for him. He's going to take what he's learned in this world and try and share it with other people. Great. If I was looking at it selfishly, I'd be like, it's one less guy I'm competing with, right, for mixing records or doing anything else in the short term. I don't know. It's just weird to me that there would be a negative response. So I'm surprised to hear you say that. That's unfortunate. I'm sorry you had to go through that.
Yeah, it wasn't fun, but you know, I really did believe in it, and
sure. It's clearly working.
Yeah, it worked. That's the thing. It worked.
Yeah,
they weren't going to stop me, basically. I think that maybe there were some thoughts of like, who is he to go and share this stuff? He's not like Andy Sneap. He's not Colin Richardson. He's not Randy Staub. Like, who is he to like get up there and teach this stuff? And it's like, well, exactly. They're not doing it. I need to get their information and pass it on. So,
yeah.
I think there was a little bit of a, who is he to do that? And then also this fear of he's going to take food off of our tables by training the competition, which I always thought was BS. I always thought it was BS because if anything, what would happen is people would start home recording and realize how hard it is, and then hire those guys anyways, which is what happened.
And that's a weird thing. It's I understand what you're saying makes sense to me in my mind. Like, you know, I can comprehend some of those fears, but I guess you and I both know you're in any business. It doesn't matter whether it's music, whether it's construction, whether you're in the restaurant business. Anything new is always scary, sure, to everyone, fine. But ultimately, you find out after a while that that's just part of the process. And metal and rock in general, historically, have been a really solid community musically. I mean, sure, there are fractions. Sure, there are people that don't get along or that disagree on stuff. But for the most part, even still to this day, the metal community is a pretty accepting place. I mean,
I agree.
Yeah. So it's again,
overall, it was very accepting.
Yeah. Well, then when that's great. Yeah. So this is another one. So, okay, you're going to do URM. You've committed to it. You're going to do it. I want to talk about the band in a minute, and I want to talk about actually, you know, let me just ask this. Let me get this out of the way first. You've probably been asked this 75,000 times. But for those that don't know, looking at the camera, pretending like you're actually on the other end, paying attention to me with bated breath. For those that don't know, Eyal's father is a pretty world famous conductor. And
yes.
Normally, in case you are also unaware, heavy metal music does not require a conductor, thus was probably not the first music Eyal was exposed to. And you have this journey, I'm sure this musical journey that could probably fill 2 or 3 podcasts. But what is it like when your dad finds out that metal is kind of the road you're going to go down? And it's
not good.
So it's exactly like we think. It's like, is it echoes of that's not even real music? Is every 80s movie cliche, like, is it in there? It's bad. It's not a friendly journey at that point.
It is that, but with his accent. They thought that metal was noise, first of all, and that the people, and okay, now in the 90s, my parents were kind of right. They were afraid of me getting in with that crowd. Now, if I think back to the 90s death metal scene, maybe my parents had a point. That was a scary scene. There were a lot of neo-Nazis, lots of gangs. Yeah. It was a very violent scene, at least in Atlanta. So, and the kids that I was going to play in bands with were like all the kids that went to the school for violent kids. So it was, they went to that school.
The school for the violent kids.
Yeah, there was a school like that in Atlanta. But, so, you know, I'm just thinking back. It's like,
of course.
Yeah. And then there's the style of music they don't understand. I mean, they didn't listen to rock music. None of that. I mean, my parents, they're not American, first of all. They came here in 79, but like they were already like 30. And they didn't get any American culture, American rock, like any of that. It was just like completely foreign to them. And so the most extreme version of American rock, like it just, they didn't get it. And it's okay.
Well, and then out of all the metal, right? So you have this whole kaleidoscope of metal to choose from. You gravitate towards the death, the heavier, especially in the 90s, the heavier of the heavier. What is that transition? Why don't you go for the arena rock or even the Maiden or the Priest or even, Black Album, Metallica? You gravitate towards, you want to be a little more extreme, a little more aggressive. Where do you think that decision sort of lied in the path? Lied. Where did it lay in your lay? There it is. The word.
Dude, I think that's in the psychological makeup or something. That I've wondered about that because it's kind of like adrenaline junkie behavior or addict behavior of needing more. But I guess like heavy music like speaks to some part of me that I don't know, who knows where it comes from, but I definitely think that if you're into heavy music, like really, really into it, something messed up happened to you at some point that it speaks to. It's messed up music for messed up people who have learned to become adjusted, cool adults. But there's a reason for why that type of sound speaks to you on a deeper level. And it was like a magnet or like a black hole, basically, just pulling me towards heavier, just like, it's not enough. I just want to feel that thing I'm looking for. And it happened to be closer to death metal and black metal, I guess.
Was it always guitar, or was there anything before guitar, or maybe that was a competitor with guitar?
Violin and piano first, but once guitar started, there's no
looking
competitor.
back. No. So you never wanted to be a drummer or a bass player or a vocalist per se?
I mean, I took vocal lessons, I took drum lessons, I took bass lessons. So those are all just to get better at music and to be able to communicate with those people, never to like really do it.
Sure. Yeah, well, and in this day and age, I think to your point, there are two generations I look at of musicians now that pretty much have a different approach than maybe things were 20 or 30 years ago, where if you were a drummer, that was kind of, I want to play the drums, and you take the drums till its logical conclusion, till you just don't do it anymore. I think you're of one of two generations that's coming to fruition now, where everybody learned a little bit of everything, like you said, so they could communicate. There's what I call their community instrument, which is their primary. Like if you were going to play with anyone else, you'd play guitar because that's your community instrument. But everybody then learns a little bit about something else, whether it's piano, bass, composition, just so that they can write and record their own music or communicate better, like you said, with other musicians. And I think that's kind of that's one of the cool changes I've, as an old man, watched over the years, is this propensity to try and learn more about other instruments as opposed to being so laser focused on just this and only this, and this, everything else is horrible and just this. It's kind of another thing I also find prevalent more in metal and rock than I do other genres as well, which is also kind of cool.
I think you're right. I think the reason for it is the technology. And I'm sure that my reason for getting drum lessons is similar to some other people. I started trying to program drums, gave those programmed drums to a drummer, and basically got laughed out of the room for writing something that required like 8 arms and 6 legs, and just like he shamed me at this session back in like 2003 or 2 or whenever it was. But I realized I can't just be, if I want a drummer to take what I wrote seriously, I need to kind of understand how their instrument works and what's realistic and what's not, because this situation can't happen again, where I pay for a session and get ready and put all this work in, and then I hand something to the drummer and get made fun of because it's not even humanly realistic. For, I mean, even an octopus could do it, but
which is pretty awesome. Okay, so all right, now that this picture's a little clearer, so now this next question, in my mind anyway, makes more sense. So you come into metal, it's a challenge. You get into metal against all the odds, you do everything, and you get the things that most people, we pointed out, think they want. You get the success in this area, the success in that area, but you're not happy. Then you make the decision to change, to share, and kind of help people grow so that you can kind of also contribute to preserving this thing you love, this metal, so that great music gets made for generations to come. You meet resistance with that as well. So now you're finally here. You're like, fuck it. You're through all the resistance. You get on the other side. URM is a reality. What are let's just pick one. What's one of the first challenges you want to help people solve in making better metal music? As you're thinking through what URM is going to do and accomplish, you say, well, this is going to be one of the first topics or one of the first techniques or one of the first, this thing I hear constantly is one of the hardest things to deal with for metal and rock musicians. What was that you thought you needed to maybe address first?
I wanted to get them to stop worshiping gear and to start focusing on just trying to get better. And that's a huge challenge. That's kind of like the never ending challenge, but to basically to help people remove the focus off of external factors having anything to do with them getting better. Like, oh, this dude's so awesome because he has this rack of outboard gear, or obviously he's got a $16,000 computer with all these plugins. Like, of course his stuff sounds good and mine doesn't. So that's it. I'm never going to be good. Some level of that kind of thinking is super, super common. I mean, you see it in the guitar community too, where people think that buying some new like $3,000 guitar is going to make them better, or like some really, really nice modeler or nice amp, or like this next new thing is what'll make the difference to them sounding good. And it's not. Practicing is what'll make the difference. And the same goes with mixing and production. So to get people to come down out of the clouds, like that clouds, I just say the clouds because it's a dream, out of the dream studio dream, and to get to work on actually getting good at this. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges right there. And then if you want to talk about just like a tactical thing, just in the moment, one of the things that I try to get people to stop doing, like first things, is to not mix and write at the same time, which is really tough for musicians, but try to do them in two separate sessions. If we're talking about like really fundamental things, like one of the first things trying to get people to understand is mixing and writing, unless you're one of these geniuses that, they just download the stuff and it comes out in finished form. We know a few of those people, but they're super, super rare. In reality, most people engage different parts of their brains when they're mixing, when they're writing, and when you're doing anything like writing, focus on that. When you're doing mixing, focus on that. And then be very, very serious about your organization, so that when it comes time to mix, whether you're mixing or someone else is, you know what you're looking at. So that's not super sexy as far as things to overcome, but just overcoming that, like changing your mindset from I need gear, I need all this gear, to I just need to get better, I need to practice. And then also stopping this habit of trying to do everything at the same time. Those two things right there will get you way better and quickly, because you'll be focused on the right things.
So do you believe in demos then for people? Do you believe that people should basically cut things in demo form and then work up? Or how would you encourage someone to pursue their own songwriting from a technical standpoint? Just based on what you're saying there, it sounds like compartmentalizing is a big part of that approach, which I actually would agree with, because like you said, you're using different functions and different processes, psychologically, mentally, even emotionally. But are you a fan of the demo? Would you rather get a demo and then try and reprocess it from there? Or are you a fan of record the final version, even if it's not all at once from the get-go, and move forward from there?
So demo, but with contingencies and with fail safes, and with the knowledge that you might capture some stuff for later right then. So a serious demo, meaning so you have a template that already sounds good. It's like a tested template. You put it together. It's very efficient, but it already sounds pretty good. And if you're recording live instruments into it, you're taking the care involved so that in the likelihood, and this will happen with some parts, that you want to use the part from the demo on the real thing, you actually can. So, I mean, simple things like new strings on guitars, the guitar's properly set up. If you're not using Evertunes, make sure that you're in tune. If you're recording scratch drums, I know why you would do that, but say you do, make sure that the heads are in tune. Like all these little details that take like 2 seconds to just make sure of. Don't say it's just a demo. I mean, it is just a demo, but don't think like it's just a demo, because lots of times you'll capture something on a demo you won't be able to recreate later. Like, especially when it comes to like a lead or like some performance or like this, the way you played off of this really, really cool effect while you were writing the part. That's such this moment in time. This has happened to me and it's happened to all of my friends. And like, it is really sad when you can't recreate it and the demo is so bad that you can't just import it. So I say yes, demo, but make it a serious demo that that takes into consideration you might actually want to use this or some of it, parts of it.
Sage advice. I like it. So you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. It's smart.
Yes.
Smart. It's probably why you're doing the teaching, and I'm just asking stupid questions. This is how we delineate who does what.
So they're great questions.
Well, here's the thing with you. Well, so one of the things I look at when I look at something like URM, and I see over this decade now how it's grown and how many people participate, both on the back end as instructors and mentors, but people that tune in and learn stuff. This is going to sound like an elementary question, right? So, but I'm going to say it anyway. Do you ever worry about running out of stuff with all of the talent that you have assembled behind the scenes to teach or talk about? Do you ever worry that one day you're going to be like, well, we've already covered that, or how do you guys kind of deal with the fact that the joint community that you've assembled as instructors and mentors, I mean, the span of experience that these cats have is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So at some point in time, is there an obsolescence built in to what you can offer, or do you not even think along those lines?
So, yeah, I do think along those lines, but it's irrational. It's very similar to the songwriter feeling like, how are they going to write another song? Like, how am I going to do this again? Am I going to run out of ideas? And then somehow you don't run out of ideas because it's a regenerative thing. So if music were to stop, like if there were to be no new bands and no new producers and no new plugins and no new anything, it just stopped, then we would run out at some point. But I think that the fear of running out comes from us living in the present and not being able to predict the future. So I don't know who is going to be the big up and coming metal producer a year from now. I have some ideas, but there could be somebody I've never even heard of. Like, a friend of mine who's already been on could record the album of the year or discover some new technique. There could be some new trend that all the producers start doing that we just can't predict. And because I can't see that irrational side of my brain is like, oh, we're going to run out. But the thing is, I started having those thoughts in 2016. That's why I say it's irrational. But it's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's a good thought to have, because if I was to feel like we'll never run out, it'll just come to me or something, that's bad. So we need to feel the fear a little bit to keep us looking for that next step. And also the last thing we want to do is become one of those old music companies that are just kind of stuck in another century. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
of course, yeah.
Like they were cool at one point, but they just like stopped. Not that they stopped caring, but they stopped pursuing the future. I think they still very much care about what they do, but they like settled into a groove at some point, and then that was it forever. That will never be us. And so that's the decision to like keep looking for the cutting edge. And I think how can you run out? As long as music keeps on happening and this genre stays alive, there will always be a cutting edge. And so we'll always have something to pull from.
Well, and what's funny about what you're saying there, which I believe is to be true, is in rock and metal in particular, at least again, I find it's one of the most accepting to new technology. So they embraced the digital audio workstation, they embraced like rock and metal musicians ultimately look at new technology and new opportunities and the cutting edge, as you said, really, really favorably at the beginning. And then like 2 weeks later, they decide to start infighting with one another about
Exactly
how
2
this
weeks.
how this amazing piece of technology that's only 2 weeks old isn't as good as this piece of technology. And it's these inane, as we pointed out before, inconsequential, nonsensical arguments. But have you noticed, and this is where the question is, I'm not just making a statement, have you noticed that fueling that kind of stupidity has become its own subculture and industry within heavy music? Are you seeing that too, or is it just me being old?
Oh no, it's there, but I don't think it's there so much among the creators.
Okay.
I think even though metal is something where the fan base creates like a lot of what people it's coming from the fan base. This is music created by the fan base.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that you don't really find those arguments too much between artists that are leading the pack or producers that are leading the pack so much. You find that from people that are generally not putting much out in general. But it's a passionate community, and that's a good thing. So I think that passion for arguing about really dumb stuff is also, if you point that in the right direction, that passion is part of why this genre has been able to survive for this long.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So it's just a misdirection of that energy that they have. But that's what I was saying when you asked, like, what's one of the first challenges to overcome is to get people to stop thinking about gear and start thinking about getting better. It's also to partially like take the air out of those types of time wasting arguments, because they are time wasting arguments. Like if you're comparing, like, say, an Axe FX and a Quad Cortex, who cares? They're both great. What difference does it make? Like, use the one you like. They're both great. Like they're both great. It's fine. Yeah. Some people
the
use
only
one,
variable is you
other.
At that point in time.
Exactly.
You're either good enough to make it sound good or you're not. Doesn't matter what it is. It's
and if you talk to the people at those companies, that's how they feel too. They have a ton of respect for their competitors. And they're even friends.
I can speak to that right now, coming from the manufacturer's side. I mean, it's ridiculous to think that there's some weird lunchroom that all of the vendors and manufacturers sit in where like there's like cliques like this is the cool crowd and we don't talk to the. It's not how it works. Anybody that makes gear on any level, software, hardware for a living, is doing something they're passionate about and trying to do it to the best of their ability. That has been my experience, hands down, in every facet of this industry. So a lot of times we find on our end, the customer, as you pointed out, or the end user, the fan, tries to pit the manufacturers against the manufacturers. Like it's not going to work because we all started out with the same goal. Like no one is 12 years old and thinks one day I want to work for a drum software sample company. No one. That's not. I wanted to be Gene Simmons. This was where life and the road took me. Right. So, and you get here and you're grateful you're here. You're not. Everybody else that does what I do or that does what you do or that's running something that tries to contribute to the music community, we're all coming from the same place. We just want it to be better. We want everyone to have a good time. We want everyone to sound good. We want everyone to feel good. We want to give people value for their money. And it's just an interesting time in the world in general where, again, whether you love music or you hate music, the way music is consumed has changed so much. And then there are still pockets, like, again, rock and metal, where people still buy records and they love records. They listen to records and they talk about records and they obsess about. I mean, that used to be more common across all genres than it is kind of within our little segment of the rock and heavy metal world. And I'm grateful it's still there. So I think to your point, it's just a weird thing, I think, to all of us as we look out at it, to the amount of time, energy, and effort spent on the negativity. It doesn't seem to be doing anyone any good. Although there are some people that seem to be able to capitalize on it and make a living fueling it in some podcast spaces and YouTube spaces. So I'm just glad that we can hopefully offer the alternative view of it's all going to be okay. It's literally, as they say, it's only rock and roll. It's going to be fine. You're going to be okay.
I was just going to say, yeah, on YouTube, you can definitely make a lot of money off of negativity.
The hate clicks, right? That's what they call it?
Yeah.
The hate clicks, yeah. So, I mean, if that's where you want to spend your time, fine. But here, we're just talking about great, encouraging heavy metal and hard rock stuff, so why don't you come over here? So, listen, I want to talk more about the band, though, right? So, we know URM, we know where it's at, so we've got a lot of things going on there. But generally speaking, once you're a guitar player in a band and you've toured and you've done that life, and again, there is nothing like being in a rock or a metal band. It's not like being in any other kind of organization. It's like it becomes a family, becomes a thing. Do you miss that aspect as you're kind of going through the early stages of URM? Even when it's showing success, are you kind of looking backwards at all, going, that's the one component I miss. I miss the road. I miss the guys. Or are you just completely blinders on? It's URM from here on out.
No,
in the beginning.
No, I didn't miss it at all. As a matter of fact, I never wanted to play guitar again, and never wanted to have anything to do with it. The thought of being in a band again gave me anxiety. Like I would feel my blood pressure rising if I thought about it. So when I say I was out, and to me, it was dead to me. And I didn't look back favorably on those times. I felt like something great ended too soon. And I was like forever pissed about how it ended. And I thought that it ended right before things started going really well. Like right as it was about to turn the corner, it ended. And so after years and years of work, it's like you were starting to see the signs. And the reason I knew that we were seeing the signs, not just inventing some story, is because our merch numbers were going up. And that's how that's how the metal community shows you. So our merch numbers were finally starting to become respectable. For the first time ever, they were not sad. They were like showing this really good upward trajectory. Suddenly we could afford things, and it was, we're climbing up out of that gutter into the real world of a working band, and then done. So I was always pissed about that. Like, that's why I restarted it. It like over a decade later, I was still pissed about it.
Wow. So now, and you've just alluded to that. So you're restarting the journey, that particular facet of your life's journey. What is it easier the second time around, or more difficult with all the time in between and the knowledge you've gained? Did you find getting back into band life more enjoyable than you thought it would be, or is it exactly what you thought it would be at this point in time?
It's different, but different and the same at the same time.
Sure.
So yes, I have a lot more going on right now. But also I'm much better at managing my time. I also have a much bigger network, and technology is much better. So all these things that took a lot more time back in the day that I didn't have access to, I now have access to. So the ability to do things in less time is much better now. The big thing for me was, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to make it count, and I'm not going to do this with just anybody. Like none of the mindsets or attitudes that caused us to end up where we ended up last time are going to be involved in this version of it. It's like, I now know what success is. Like, I now know what it is like to stay with the same group of people for a decade. I now have that experience. I have the experience of bringing something into the world from nothing, with resistance and making it work. And I now know beyond a shadow of a doubt what kinds of attitudes in a band will destroy it. And also from doing the podcast and speaking on the Riffhard podcast, I speak to guitar players.
Sure.
And speaking to successful guitar players on every single one of those, and talking to them about what works in their bands, and learning from that. And every time I would talk to them, and they would tell me, "Oh, we have great communication. We have great communication. We have great communication. We have great communication. So like, and I start hearing all these things repeated to me, and I'm like, we had really bad communication. All these things that they say they have in their successful bands, we didn't have, and they weren't things that came from the external world. They're about how we ran our own world. And so the decision was, we're going to do it, but we're going to do it right, and it's going to be run properly. And if it means all new people, then it's going to be all new people, but it's going to happen correctly. And it's been going great. I mean, got the Metal Blade deal, like record came out, people love it, like they think it's our best one. It's like, it's going great. It's pretty awesome.
But here's what's important. Are you ready? How many guitar players does it take to change a light bulb? I'll tell you. Do you know?
I don't know.
It takes 7. It takes 1 to change the light bulb and 6 to stand around and go, he did that the wrong way. I could have done it better.
Yeah, I guess that could go for mixers too, or mechanics.
No one on the internet laughed at that either, so don't worry. I hear the crickets, but I'm going to tell these jokes anyway. I don't care about you people. This isn't about you. This is about us. Me and my computer screen friend.
I was thinking about like how true that is.
But let me ask, so you also just touched on this. So now you have one more thing in your life that's back, and it's so how do you shuffle the priorities? So URM is obviously nothing runs on its own, but URM has clearly been this juggernaut moving forward for a decade now. How do you prioritize where you're going to? There's only so many hours a day. You've got podcasts, you got URM, you got band. How do you keep it all straight up here, and how do you stay physically healthy? Because that's a big part of being able to do this as well.
I would be lying if I said it was easy. It's not easy at all. And it's like a constant struggle. And it's something that if I take the eye off that ball of like thinking about what's the priority, I'll spend too long on the wrong thing. It's because it's really easy to do that. So, the more organized I am and the more, I guess, present I am in my own life with what's important and what's going on, and the more I track literally everything, like I'm a pretty meticulous tracker most of the time. That's kind of how I do it. And I don't really do the to-do lists so much. Like sometimes if I have like, I don't know, 28 emails I have to write and I don't want to forget one, I'll write it all down and then just check off the list or something, or like but in general, I'm not doing the to-do lists. I'll do more like time blocks. And then during those time blocks, I will just try to get into this state of mind where I'm just in the rabbit hole and try to get as much done as humanly possible, but not like rushing through anything, but just like intense, like super intense. And it's tough, but I feel like I'm not an Elon Musk worshiper, by the way. I'm about to say this. I don't worship any humans. Like I definitely am not into guru worship. So I'm saying this without like, because I know that his name carries a lot of thoughts. So I'm not one of his fanboys, but the dude does a lot of different things. And so I was listening to something about him, about how he does that from someone that worked around him. And the way that he does that is that he's really, really good at context shifting, which I'm not very good at. So I decided, okay, I'm going to try to get better at context shifting. And apparently what he does is, he does a million things, but when he does those things, he is all in. Like if he can only spend 90 minutes on something, he's spending 90 minutes on some brutally intense part of it that nobody else can do. Okay. And basically makes the time count, apparently. So whether or not that's true, that's how it operates, I don't know. But I felt like maybe that's what I should be doing, is when I do spend the time on something, you go all out about the thing that's going to move the needle the most and hope for the best.
Whew, that's just that hurts my head to think about. Like planning the day out around that strategy in my mind. Again, I relate to some degree, certainly not at the level you're at with having all these major priorities, but certainly for me, it came down to years ago. When you talk about time management, I ended up getting a small circular, you can get them on Amazon, it was like $6 timer. I can set it for 50 minutes and I reset it every hour. And I give myself the last 10 minutes of every hour to just have to pull away from whatever I'm doing and reset so that I can, okay, in 10 minutes, I'm going to start the next hour. And this is what I'm going to try and get done in that hour. And I relate to,
that works.
Trying to take it serious, but also not losing myself in it, because I think the more active you are and the more proactive you are, the more you run the risk of burning out quicker than everybody else around you. And then you're not only a liability to yourself, but now you're going to slow them down too, because they're going to be concerned about you. So I really appreciate that sort of mindset. And it's tough too, because you named it, ultimate recording machine. So that you don't, from ultimate, there's no, unstoppable. I'm sorry. I always see the U and I think ultimate, but that means you can't stop. It means there's this level of energy and intensity built in already. It's like, so when people sign up and people get involved, they're like, you've already pre-programmed them to be ready to go. Do you feel any pressure about that particular sort of expectation that the clients and the newcomers and the subscribers have, that, it's like this kind of energy that you're predicting already? Does that kind of find its way into how you structure the classes, what you're going to talk about, who you're going to let talk about them?
Yeah, and we've learned to pay attention to when we're getting signals that it's too much. We've definitely gotten that back from people, and I've gotten it in my personal life, like the back off the throttle, and definitely have gotten it from customers too, of like, this is too much.
Wow,
it's like, I thought it's value,
but it's in the name.
Yeah,
didn't you know?
It's, I guess, that you can provide too much value. And I'm being funny. It's not too much value. If you're giving them more than they can process, then it's not valuable, because you may as well not be giving it to them. So finding the right amount and this is where it gets tough, is because different people have different capacities for intensity and different talent levels, different intellect, different amount of time, different, we're all starting in different places. So it's that's a challenge to figure out what's like a happy medium, and there is no like one happy medium. You're going to end up doing too much for one crowd or not enough for another. And so you have to be okay with, we don't service this one crowd. Like, for instance, we don't service absolute novices. If you're an absolute novice, like you don't know what a plugin is, which is a lot of people, we're not there. We have made the decision that that's not who we speak to. The beginner, like we do have a beginner course, but it's a beginner at mixing, like assuming you already know what a DAW is and you've already messed around in one, you're just not good at it. But that's the difference between beginner and novice. And novice, like, we just don't put energy into that, because what we do is too much. So I think identifying who isn't your customer is just as important as identifying who is your customer, and like actually making a decision to say, no, not our area. That's helped.
Do you get a lot of pressure and input from your customer base on who they'd like to see involved in the Nail the Mix series? Are they constantly bombarding you with, we want to see this, we want to see that? Do you get a lot of that, given the fanatical nature of the people that are taking the courses?
Bro, I just got this idea, and like, I don't know if you've thought of it, but if you consider having Slipknot on Nail the Mix, it's like,
daily.
Never thought about that. Like, thank you.
Yeah.
Maybe it would be awesome to have Metallica too, right? So we get those, but you know what? It's fine, because while there are like those funny ones where it's like, no, I didn't think of trying to get Slipknot on.
Nope.
At the same time, though, it's like, yes, please bring them forward, because I appreciate the enthusiasm. It means people care. And also, there are several times where they'll bring up something I haven't heard of that I should be aware of, and that's how I find out about it. And when we're talking about staying on the cutting edge, you can never think that you know everything that's out there. It's the older you get, the easier it is to fool yourself into thinking that you know, and not listening to people's suggestions. And you got to check this out, got to check that out. So I try to not have the attitude of like scoffing at that, and to actually look at those suggestions, because that's where you'll find the next thing that's coming up.
Sage advice. Let me ask you this question. This is an opinion question. There's no right or wrong answer. Given your experience and all the things you've sort of witnessed and everything you guys have taught, and everyone sort of involved in this teaching and mentoring process, if you were, you don't have to, but if you were going to pick the most difficult style of metal to work with from a mixer production standpoint and get it to sound the way everyone thinks it should, what would that subgenre or genre of metal be?
Definitely the symphonic extreme metal.
Ooh.
That is by far the most difficult, hands down.
All the frequencies, all the time.
Yeah. Like an orchestra is like already takes up everything. And then an electric guitar takes up everything. And it's just everything takes up everything in both those genres alone. And you put them together, and that's the craziest stuff, I think.
Wow. And of course, it's also a very specific fan base. I mean, that again, I don't know enough about that genre to speak intelligently, but I do know enough to know that everybody that's in the metal isn't into symphonic death metal. So it's like, okay, but it is, I also know enough to know that it's a growing genre, and that there are a lot of acts and bands coming along, taking that in kind of a new direction and going different places. As you see things like that, and you think to yourself, okay, like you'd mentioned earlier, here's something new. I'm learning, we're going. Do you feel you guys are in a good position based on that sort of, I mean, you're always looking, everyone on your team has got to be kind of one step ahead because this is what you do for a living. Do you kind of feel like you see where metal and its different permutations and do you see where it's going? Do you see where some of it's headed? Is any of it a mystery to you anymore when we get there? Or have you pretty much been able to predict, well, this is going to be the thing, or this is going to be the thing, you watch, this will happen, that sort of thing?
I try not to.
But could you?
If I tried, not 100%. No one can 100%.
Sure, of course.
Like if I actually sat down and like put some thought into it, could probably come up with like some pretty good close-ish predictions. But I think I'm intuitive about it, and my intuition about that stuff has guided me through my entire career really, really well. And so I put a lot of faith and stock in knowing and trusting my intuition on these things, just because I have and this is not some recreatable thing, because I don't even know how you describe this, but I just know that the times I've followed my intuition about like this is the path to the future, or like there's this thing I'm really into, I don't know why, like it turns out that becomes a thing, or that was the path to the future, or that it's happened so many times, and everything successful I've ever done came from that type of thought. And then every successful thing that I haven't done that I should have done also had that kind of thought, where like I had that intuition and then I just didn't do it for whatever reason, and then a couple of years later someone else did. So I don't try to consciously predict the future, but I do listen to my intuition, and I do think that the intuition is kind of doing that for you. Like if you're actively taking in a bunch of different data points, and you are doing some analysis of like who's doing well, why are they doing well, what did they do, like what's going on, what am I seeing a lot of, like, and then kind of like do this giant math equation in your subconscious. I think that's where intuition starts to kind of come from, and I've learned to listen to it. It's almost always right.
So it works
not
for
scientific,
you, which is a good thing.
Yes.
but it works for you and you've got the
Yes.
results in your life. So now given that, so you don't have any more time you can add to your schedule. You're already booked. You're full. Okay. So as you're already completely tapped out time-wise, I'm sure you've humored these thoughts. I mean, as URM gets more successful, as it will, and the band starts to take off more, you have no more room to put new things, but the things you already have in those spaces become more and more demanding. Do you see an end game there? Is like I said, is there a breaking point where you're like, oh, this can only be this successful because I can only do so? And do you feel a limitation built in based on the number of things? Is there ever a time where you have to step away from one to just pursue the other solely, or how do you kind of restructure that thinking? Because if your intuition serves you right, one day you might find that you're telling yourself, hey, that these are both on the cusp of even doing better than they currently are. How do I? And then there's the podcast. I mean, it's a lot. So since there is no more room to add another thing, when these things reach their maximum potential, do you ever worry about that?
Yeah, of course, for sure. But I've seen people do things like step away from a certain role but retain ownership or things like that. If it were to happen, I would figure it out. I mean, these are good problems to have.
Of course. Of course.
But yeah, I do think that could be a reality. But I mean, at some point, like, we're coming up on 10 years of URM. Like, I don't plan on running it for 30 years.
What?
So, like there's there's a limit. So, there's going to be some like transition at some point, I think, with that. There has to be. That's the natural way of things. But like I long for the day that I have to worry about which one has to go.
Sure. Like you said, great problem to have.
Yeah.
So given all the success, right, in the road, you're here now, you're on the other side of it. How does your family feel about heavy metal now? Same feeling? Still not music?
No, they're down. Yeah.
Now it's a little bit different. Now it's I don't, not like they're at home listening to, to metal now. I'm just saying, as far as you proving to them that this could be something viable, every parent, I'm sure, as just they want the best for their kids. They want to make sure their kids can take care of themselves. And your father, with his experience, already knew what a difficult life music would be, I'm sure. So, and then you factor metal into it, and I think we can both agree his concerns were probably founded as you look back and with 2020 vision. Yeah. But you're on the other side of it, and you feel good, I'm sure. It has to be a good feeling to know that you've kind of weathered the storms and you've eked out this career and this identity for yourself. And with all these feathers in your hat, how do you like to be recognized? Do you like to be recognized as the URM guy? Do you like to be recognized as the guy that worked on a record? Do you like to be recognized as the guitar player in the band? What is the one thing where you're like, yeah, you kind of hold your head a little higher and this is how you want people to kind of remember you?
I'd say any of those is fine. I'm cool with any of them. Hopefully people think of me as someone that brought a lot of good into the metal scene, whether through music or through things like URM. But I don't want to write my own effigy. So let someone else
for later. Yeah.
Yeah. Let someone else write that.
Okay. So as we wind down, as we talked about the nitty and the gritty, I'm going to give you these are some fastball questions. There's no right or wrong answers, but I want this all metal related. Ready? What is the heaviest guitar tuning? Put the debate to an end. What is it? Heaviest guitar tuning?
Heavy is relative to the music.
You're such a politician.
But it's true. It's true.
It's heavy, accurate, absolutely. But
heavy is a feeling. And so,
what's your favorite heaviest guitar tuning?
Dude, I play in like 5 tunings. So it's
so all going to be difficult.
I'm giving you the truth. I'm giving you the truth. Like,
I get it, but it's difficult truth.
Heavy is context related.
Fair enough. Can you be? Is there anything that's too heavy, where it's just so heavy it's not? No, it's not going to work.
There's things that are too muddy. So like if you go super low, you have to. I mean, like if you go to drop E or lower, you have to watch the speed. I guess, because just because of physics. So
Science.
you have to definitely um, know the weapon you wield and what it's good for and what it's not. And so there are things that it's not that it's too heavy, it's just that it would be maybe an improper use of a super low tuning.
Sure.
But I don't
Makes
think
sense.
there's
That's fair. No such thing as too heavy, but contextual again. Is there such a thing as too many strings on a guitar?
no.
All the good answers. Just everything is game. There's nothing, you can't do any wrong. Okay.
I mean, you can do wrong, but the gear doesn't do the wrong. The gear is just the gear.
Sticking to that. I like it. I like where your head's at with this. You can't be shaken. Thought I'd maybe get you off your game. Tell people you stop it with the 9 strings, stop it with 17 strings, but no, you're there. Let's keep going. Let's wrap it up with this. Do you see a time when the concept that, let's just talk about URM podcast. Do you see a time where that sort of business model, which is not a word I really like to use, but I'm going to use that word, business model, might be applicable or interesting to other genres of music other than just metal and rock?
I've thought about that.
I was going to say, is there a pop version? Is there a country version? Is there anything else? I mean, again, with your kind of your process already in place and the time-tested elements of it are in a decade, I'm just curious if maybe it was something you had been entertaining or even thought about.
Thought about it, and have entertained it. The problem is that what makes metal great is what makes it great and what makes it unique. And you don't have, maybe in some forms of electronic music you do, but in general, in other genres, you don't have the kind of community that you have in metal. Like, for instance, if you go to NAMM, it's disproportionately metal oriented, which I've always thought is interesting, because if you compare that to the Billboard charts, if you compare the NAMM floor to the Billboard charts, it's very, very different. The Billboard charts are pop, are dominated by pop with some metal, but then you go to NAMM and it's like 50% metal. And I think that that's because metal people are into creating metal. They are into it. So it's music made for and by not only, but a lot of the people who make it are making it for people who make it. I mean, there are non-musician fans as well, of course, but a huge contingent of metal is made up of people who make metal. And I think because of that, because of metal being a lifestyle and an identity, and because of the fact that people in metal have that lifestyle and identity and they make it, that's why URM is possible in metal. Is I don't understand how that would work in a genre where you don't have the lifestyle, the identity, and the community and the passion for this exact thing.
Sure.
This is part of the culture, is the on the musician side of the fence, this is part of that culture. So we fit right in. Whereas I don't know, I haven't seen those cultures in other genres. Like I said, maybe in some of the electronic, but not like metal.
Yeah, well, metal is unique. I think. I mean, that's the driving force. But like you said, behind all of this, it's a very unique community, and we're fortunate to have it. I'm trying to think if I have anything else I want to ask you while you're here. I could talk to you for hours and hours and hours, but then I get yelled at by other people. So I'm just thinking live, folks. Just don't worry about what I'm doing. Just know that if anything else comes out, it's because I had to think about it. We're grateful that you had the time to talk to us again, given the fact that you're so busy and you have so much going on. And props, a lot of respect. Your success is kind of unique in our industry, and it's nice to hear stories of people who set their mind to accomplishing something, and then ultimately, whether it's that exact thing or the journey to accomplishing what they thought they wanted to, that leads them to the thing they really end up accomplishing and then really falling in love with. That's just always an inspiring kind of thing. And your story is one that really kind of fits that mold. In a lot of ways, You're kind of like that quintessential, hey, you want to hear a great story about a guy that believed he could do something and then he went out and he did it, but then there was this other thing that he decided he wanted to do and it kind of went, and then, but then he came back and it's you have all of these sort of, it'd be a great movie, not probably a good book because there's just too many like weird things that you'd have to write about metal and descriptions. It'd be an R-rated book, but it'd be a great movie. So I'm grateful for you, man. I'm grateful you're in the community.
Well,
I'm
thanks.
grateful that you're helping people and that you're part of URM and all the people that work with you, obviously. So, yeah, just congrats on everything. And I hope that the new record continues to do well. And I hope merch sales indicate as well that people are on board for the second chapter of the ride and that you can continue to take that to its logical conclusion as well.
Dude, thank you. Thanks for having me. And by the way, yeah, if Christian Bale's listening,
yeah,
if he wants to play me,
he would. You know what? He could do it. If anyone could do it, Christian Bale could do it.
I would be cool with that.
You heard it here first. Yeah. Christian Bale to play Eyal Levi in his biopic. You've heard it here on the Sound Horizons podcast. That we have no rights to that name or that likeness, so you didn't hear it here. It's just I don't want to see this on Twitter or Instagram or somewhere else where someone takes things too seriously. So, but you can meme what that would look like if you want to Photoshop some pictures and post those in the comments of Christian Bale playing Eyal Levi in his biopic. We will more than gladly love to see those. So put those in the comments. Thank you, YouTube. That's going to sound very weird to anyone listening on Spotify or Apple, as there's no comments, and we're not trying to isolate you from what we're doing, but watch the video. I don't know what else to tell you. All right, Eyal Levi, you have been fantastic and a gentleman beyond reproach. Thank you for your time. We love you. We're grateful for you, and we look forward to speaking with you and hearing about all of your successes again in the future. So for now, we'll sign out. We'll talk to you soon, my friend.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Our pleasure.